Today we're talking about the Moza SlyPod E, which is an electronic slider or monopod for your camera. If you haven't realized by now, that's it. So it has its own built-in battery which lasts for a couple of hours, and you can control it directly on the slider itself, or you can use the app which has a variety of functions. The simple one is just to control it going up and down, and you can control its speeds too. As far as reviewing it goes, that's about as much as I'm going to cover because it's already been reviewed many times before. I would highly recommend you check out Gerald Undone's video. It's a great one to watch. He covers version 1 of this in a lot of detail. This is a slightly newer version. This is the SlyPod E. As far as differences between the two go, this one's quite a bit cheaper and it supports the same weight. That's pretty much it. But you can achieve the same style of shots with both of these SlyPods, no matter which one you have. And that's really what I was going to show you today. Just some different kinds of shots, how you can get creative with this thing, and how I set up those shots too. So this is the SlyPod when it's detached from a tripod, which I had it attached to. I'm bringing it down to its compressed size, if you want to call it that, and that is pretty much it. I have my A7iii attached to it, buttons on the bottom there, and then a plate which you can just attach it to a tripod. So you can pretty much rig this out however you want. If you want to have it facing down, you want to have it upwards as a slider, it's entirely up to you. As creative as your mind works, that's pretty much the limitation of what you can do with this. First up is a regular style slider shot, which is great for establishing shots, just for general B-roll. Basically, I had the slider set up here on the plate on the bottom, and then I just put the camera like that and let it do its thing, just moving horizontally, and that's how I achieved this style of shot. Probably the most simple of all the styles of shots that you're going to shoot with the SlyPod. It's a traditional slider shot that people, if they have the Rhino sliders or even the push sliders, you're often going to see that style of shot. Next up is a shot that if you shoot a lot of videos on your own, like myself, you would actually find quite useful. Whether you're walking or you're running or just moving and you want to capture some movement of yourself and you don't have anyone to film you, this is actually a great tool for being able to do that. One thing I figured out pretty quickly with this is if you're shooting with a big wide lens or a big wide shot, and even when the SlyPod's moving at full speed, you will find that it's quite hard to actually see the movement there because it's so gradual. If you speed it up, make it more of a time lapse, then it's a little bit more obvious, but that might not be the style of shot that you want to go with. So to fix this, you can either zoom in, use a tighter lens, or the big one, if you put something in front of the movement that's going on in the background. So let's say you're walking in the background like in this shot here, and then you have a wall in front, it amplifies the movement, it makes it a lot easier to see, and it just becomes much more of a desirable shot. Another tip for you as well, if you don't already have one, pick up a ball head. It just gives you complete flexibility with being able to control the angle of the camera, and you can just get much more creative shots. Next up is more of a creative shot to show you what's possible. I don't really know when you'd use this shot, but if you combine a gimbal and the SlyPod, you can get some pretty interesting effects. So I'll show you the shot first. So if you haven't already figured out, I had a gimbal attached to the top of the slider here, and then I had my camera on the gimbal, and I put it on inception mode. So the camera was spinning, and then it was basically like that. And the camera was spinning, let's just tighten this up here. The camera was spinning on the gimbal as this was moving forwards. So as I said, I don't really know when you would use that shot. You might have a specific purpose to use that shot. It's more just to show you what is possible if you can combine this with other tools that you have, like a gimbal. Next up was more of a test. I wanted to do like a Vertigo style shot in the car, you know, where the camera is moving forwards as it's zooming out, or zooming out as it's moving forwards. And I was going to do the zoom in or zoom out in post, but it didn't really work out. Came out as a pretty good time lapse in the end. It's a shot you don't commonly see. It's a shot you might have a use for if you need to shoot in a car and you want to shoot or show time passing in the car instead of it just being a nice boring car shot. I did it by attaching the SlyPod to, I have my base plate on here, attach it to a tripod, and then the key here was making sure that the tripod didn't move in the car. Obviously cars are bumping around, and I made sure it didn't move by using the hook on the bottom here, and I just literally had weight pulling down on that, so in the car when this was in the back seat, it just didn't move around. Because obviously with the camera attached to the SlyPod, it's fairly heavy, so when you put that on the tripod there, you're going to see a lot of movement. Pulling the weight on the hook there stopped any movement with the tripod. So that's how I did that shot. Next up was an idea I had to do a time-lapse shot at my desk while I was working. And I shot this shot first without anything in the foreground, and when I look back at the video, again, it just didn't really have that much movement to it, and it didn't look that great. I wasn't that happy with it. Basically, I put things in the foreground, and again, I just had the SlyPod set up on with the base plate there, and it was just moving forwards and backwards, and that's how I achieved that shot. Sped it up a little bit in post. I had this moving really slow, so it did amplify the movements a little bit more when I sped it up, and then you see the things kind of moving in the foreground as the camera's moving out, and then I'm working fast paced in the background because it's all been sped up. So that's how I did that shot. Next was something a little bit different. It was a regular slider shot, but it was using the macro, the 90mm f2.8 from Sony, which is a macro lens. I just picked this up. It's a beautiful lens, and I hadn't really shot a lot of macro before. What I quickly learned was the depth of field when you're so close to things is so tiny that you have to manually focus. So what I basically did was had a bunch of things just lined up, perfectly aligned, so that one wasn't a little bit further forwards and would be in focus, and the one behind wasn't in focus. Everything was perfectly aligned. Everything was pre-focused, completely on manual focus. And then I just let the slider do its thing and work its way across. And it was really interesting to see everything up really close, because it's not something you typically see. And when I was in the middle of shooting that, it gave me an idea for something, another little short film I'm going to work on. Kind of like the idea, I've just watched 1917 as well, and I think that's still resonating in my head, and it gave me an idea to do. I'm not going to give away too much, but it gave me an idea. Expect that soon. Next up was again a slider, but it was an overhead slider this time. So I achieved that by basically having the SlyPod on a heavy duty light stand attached with a base plate, and then this just overhung, and I let it do its thing while I was working. It just went overhead. You can do the same thing by keyframing in post, but now I can keyframe as well as taking the movement that this made, and just gives me an extra layer of depth if I want to zoom in as it's moving across there. If you are thinking about doing this shot, make sure you have something that can support the very front heavy weight of this. A light stand will not do the trick. You need a heavy duty one. Alternatively, a C stand will work even better. I don't have a C stand, so I didn't use one. Just make sure you have something that can support that weight. You don't want this toppling over, crashing, breaking your lens because of the SlyPod. So there we go. That is some shots with the Moza SlyPod. Something to bear in mind when you are playing around with the SlyPod is that you have to test a lot of the shots beforehand to make sure you know where the beginning and end movements are. You need to make sure that things are going to be in focus throughout that whole movement if you are manually focusing, or if you're moving around with a lot of things in the foreground or the background there. So it's not just a kind of set up once, leave it, and it's going to get your shot perfect. You will more often than not have to test out your shot a couple of times just to see where everything kind of falls into place, if that makes sense. It's kind of a niche product. It's not going to be something that everyone's going to want, but there might be certain shots that you want to achieve. You don't want to lug around a ton of equipment, and being that this is almost the same size as a monopod, it's probably quite a compact option compared to some other things out there. So if you are interested in picking it up, I'll pop a link down below. It's an affiliate link, so I will make a little bit of money from that if you click it. It doesn't cost you anything. If you didn't know, that's pretty much how we all make our money on YouTube. Any link you click, it's probably an affiliate link. So bear that in mind, but it helps support the channels and helps us pay our bills, which we all have too. All right, appreciate you watching today. That's that. I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later.